Hey, family, and welcome to episode 21 of the Critical Sense Making Sessions, facilitated by yours truly, Revolutionary Rika. Today's topic is the African Diaspora in America. Today's guest is Tiffany Ward. She is a San Francisco native and current Chicago resident. She is passionate about her friends, her work, and her family. Tiffany, tell us a little bit more about who you are, and you choose one word to describe how you're showing up.
Okay, so thank you so much, Rika, for the introduction and the invite. So basically, I am, like you said, a San Francisco native, and I've spent the last 13, almost 14 years on the East Coast, in between New York and for the past 4 years, Baltimore. I'm currently in Chicago, and going to be based a little bit more in Chicago for the next few months, definitely. And I've spent some time in Brazil and in Puerto Rico. Um, and basically, I have continued, based my work in continuing to highlight stories of African diaspora within the Americas as a whole. And I run a residency program, an artist residency, specifically for artists of African descent within the Americas. And it's nomadic, so it takes place from place to place. And I'm a writer and I'm an independent curator. And so I work in the arts just in general. And I'm also starting a publishing company this year.
Awesome news. A publishing company coming. I love
And
it.
you said one word to describe where I am now. Um, Ready.
Hmm. Ready. Ready for anything, huh?
Ready for the right thing.
There you go. Uh-oh, I like that. Ready for the right thing. That's is that our theme for 2021? Ready for the right thing?
Yes.
I love it. I love it because we are pregnant with possibilities, right? So we ready for the right thing. I love it, Tiff. So again, thank you for agreeing to come on. Um, I couldn't even really describe to you all Tiffany's um, genius and brilliance, but hopefully through this conversation, you'll be able to witness some of that through some of the stories she'll share out. But to kick us off, I'm just wanting to know with my icebreaker question, um, have how have you experienced joy over the past month? It could be something small, something big, but how have you experienced joy over the past month?
Um, I in the past month I got to see my family in San Francisco, and I sat down with my brother, and I there's been something that he's been working on for a while, and I had him write down his goals for the next, few months, in the next 5 years, next 10 years, and just like write it down and put it on a piece of paper. And I kid you not, something really, really big that he's been working on for a very long time, that he's been stuck at, uh, actually happened this month. And that was, like a very much tears of joy moment for me.
I love it. That's awesome. And I love that. The reason why I say it's awesome because you went directly to it's a joyous moment for you. But when you look at the experience, it's his experience. But look how it brought you joy. And so I like that you highlighted that. I tend to when people ask me stuff, connect to either my village or the community and share something that we're all connected to. And I like that you were able to highlight your brother, who you don't get to see often, but and get to witness, whatever his goal coming to fruition. So that's awesome.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm going to move us into our first set of questions. And so I would love for you to share a little bit about life growing up in San Francisco.
Okay, so I am originally from Hunters Point, from Harbor Road, um, and I am a fourth generation San Franciscan. Um, so I grew up in Bayview, and I went to Charles Drew Elementary School, which was a great school, and Vivette Blackwell was my principal and my third grade teacher, and she was amazing. And there's things that she instilled in us back then that I still remember today, that I'm reminded of every so often. A lot about like Blackness and Black pride. And then when I was in fourth grade, my mom brought me over to Pacific Heights to go to Convent of the Sacred Heart, which is another brilliant school in the city. But obviously in a very different part of town if you're from San Francisco. So maybe that's not obvious. But so Hunters Point is historically African American, and Pacific Heights is historically and currently mostly white, as was Convent. So that was, definitely a culture shock. Um, and it was, so I was one of the only Black kids in the school, K through 12, boys and girls, but it was divided. The boys and girls were separate. But anywho, so I think growing up in two different I feel like I grew up in two different parts of the city. Like I grew up very much in Bayview and Hunters Point, but I also grew up in Pacific Heights. And so constantly seeing, the dichotomies and the different ways of existing shaped my ideas of class and race and equality, and my understanding of uh, white liberalism.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That is, I think of the book, A Tale of Two Cities. Mhm.
Hmm.
And so that's one I think we might have read in high school or something. One of them, I know it was from way back, but listening to you describe just your experiences in Hunters Point, Harbor Road, in the thick of things, to as opposed to being up here on this pedestal in Pacific Heights with this group, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it being an amazing opportunity, and providing you with this access out of this world, right? However, trying to navigate and balance those two worlds can be challenging. So hopefully, we'll learn a little bit more about that in the coming up questions. But to get us kicked off, can you just define for us what the African diaspora is?
Okay, so if we break it down, so diaspora is a word, a Greek word that means the forced spread of peoples. So it's not just like I pick up and decide to leave. There's a reason that you're forced. And so originally it was used to talk about Jewish people and the diasporas that they face because of persecution of Jewish people throughout history. So Africans, because of the slave trade, have been forced were forced into the Americas, from as high north as Canada down south to Argentina, right? And so, and including the Caribbean in that. So that the diaspora is the spread of people and cultures. And that's something that one of the first people to ever really use that is Dr. Marta Morena Vega. And she's of Puerto Rican descent, and she's from the Bronx. And she is one of the first people to say that, and definitely one of my heroes. And I think it's a really important word, and it's definitely used a lot, today, but which is good. And I think it's important because it talks about a shared experience, because there's to be African and there's to be of the diaspora, and those can have similar things, but they're also different.
Mhm, mhm. It's good stuff. I guess I just have a counter question to your response would be, so the African diaspora that we see in Americas, they came to be based out of that came to be because of, I heard you talk about the slave trade, but
Mm.
I'm thinking more of colonialism. What role did colonialism play in forcing those groups of people to the Americas, basically? I mean, primarily, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I consider it all part of colonialism, right? So
Mhm.
like it was just it was the next stage of um after Spain and Britain and all these people were in France were invaded by the Moors for years, right? For centuries, they decided to go out and they were looking for new ways to expand their kingdoms and expand their wealth. And the way that they did that, right, was famously by the Spaniards sending out the Italian Columbus to go and search for new lands, to for new routes to make more money. And then when they encountered these people, they decided that it made more sense to subjugate them than to, be grateful for them, welcoming them when they got lost, because Columbus was lost. We know this.
Right.
So that's all part of colonialism. The idea that you arrive in a land with new people and your role is not to accept your space and to give gratitude, but instead to take over and see what you can take. That's the start of colonialism, and that was what led to slavery, the enslavement of African people and the enslavement of indigenous people, like all of it. I consider all of it to be colonialism.
I just had to get that little history lesson in there for myself. But I like that you, I remember just in undergrad, there was a professor that shared, there was never a place where the sun wasn't shining on the British Empire. Now we know Britain Island is that little, but when it spoke to just the way they were able to colonize the whole world.
Yeah.
So when I, as a young person, you heard it, I was like, oh shoot, they run it. But now looking at it, it's like they took over everything.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Because it's, I was at, I forget what museum I was at, but there was a map of the indigenous tribes from Canada to Argentina, right? And it was just this idea of how many people were wiped out because of Europeans, and then also like what that meant for the environment. And I think that that's something that people are seeing in California now, is how much, because California obviously to an extent has always been, a place where wildfires happen, but the extent to which it's happening is because of global warming, which is due to colonialism and capitalism and all this. But
Agreed.
agreed. The idea that Native Americans, Native Californians, Native Americans that were in California before knew how to be stewards of the land and how to not be harmed in this. And I think it's important that people are paying attention to this now, that we have to.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing your insight on that. Thinking back on your childhood, when did you become aware of the African diaspora?
So I really think, I don't know that it happened in childhood. There were little things that I learned about, like we watched this movie Sankofa in my when I was in like second grade, maybe second or third grade. And I saw it again as an adult, well, as a 18-year-old in college, and realized what it was about. But at that time it didn't make sense to me. And I remember Vivette bringing in our third grade teacher and then eventual principal, bringing in sugarcane. But I didn't realize that she was trying to get us to make the connection that there were some Africans that were tending to sugarcane plantations, and that those were in the Caribbean. I don't know that connection wasn't made. And I think it's also like, it's more of a reflection of who actually is in California, right? The people that are in California. And it's most of the people that I knew growing up that I understood to be Black were either African from Africa, or African American like me, like us, or occasionally like I meet a Jamaican, but like I never saw, if I was in the mission and I saw like a very, very dark skinned person speak Spanish, I just thought that was just the sun that made them like that. Like I never thought it was Africanness, that there were, I never knew that there were Afro Mexicans, or there were Afro Hondurans, or Afro people of African descent in Central America.
Mhm.
And that some of those people were in California. And I think, that's something we'll get into later. It's just about how race is spoken about in different places.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just doing a recap episode of the first 10 episodes, and Tulsi, who came on to talk about vaccinations, I think in episode 3, talked about she's Cuban, and she was born in Cuba, and she came here, and she talked about how she always got lumped with the Mexicans and just other groups when she started going to schools in California, and she really didn't fit in because she was Cuban. And in her family, her husband, I think, is black, and he's biracial. And so their kids are like 4, 5, 6 different cool like cultures together, right? But she talked about how in this country everybody gets characterized or categorized, and there you are. You look Mexican, you are Mexican. I think about Erica in high school. She used to always receive these letters, but it was like Latinos Unidos. It was stuff for, she wasn't Latino, but she always got put in this. She was like, now how y'all get a yellow paper for Black Student Union and I get this? So we didn't understand on her on her emergency card, it clearly says Black and parents are Black. But she always got the stuff for the Latino students. And we just could not understand that. But it spoke to, once somebody has looked at you and they have already in their mind said, this is who you are, and now you're associated with that group. And so, and if you don't have, a lot of, I won't say most people, a lot of people will tend to just accept that and keep pushing because they feel like they don't have power or voice, or they have a right to contest what was said or what somebody told them they were going to be. And so, just hearing some of the things you talked about just brought that up for me around, we, I didn't learn about the diaspora, but I knew that it was other things. So it wasn't that word, it wasn't that term, but I knew Black people were in all these other places because some of the conversations and the history lessons that I had. Mm-hmm. And at that age, I don't think I was necessarily, my ability to understand was not on that level. But when I got to be 18 in undergrad and the information came again, it was like, oh, I've been exposed to that because I've heard that before. Now I may not know everything. I couldn't make the connections because I was too young. But I think it's about, one, exposure, because later on it won't just be new. It will also be it'll be something that I have context for now. Because I can, like you talked about Vivette sharing that with you guys in the 3rd grade. And it wasn't until you was 18 when you looked at it again, you realized, oh, but you just didn't have the context the first time around, but you got the exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. And so the last question in that first set is, what did you learn about the African diaspora in school and their significance in the country? And I know you said not much, but you can elaborate a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think it's complicated, right? Because like definitely when I was in high school, I had a teacher that talks about slavery in Brazil. And there was because at the time there was like George Bush had made a comment about Brazil, and I might be like paraphrasing this the wrong way, but it was something like they were talking about Afro-Brazilians, and he was like, oh, y'all got Black people down there too? And yeah, this is like, we were in high school, and so that was, and I remember my mom being like, there's Black people everywhere. So in my head, I was like, oh, because of the military, right? Because we know in California, like I know people that are like Filipino and Black, are Korean and Black, and their parents met when they were stationed abroad, right? So I was like, oh, so there must be like Black people in the military in Brazil. And which, and I remember one of my Spanish teacher, Miss Morales, Erica Morales, like she took me to this dance class, and it was Afro-Brazilian dance. And I remember coming home to my mom and being like, yeah, I guess it's like the Africans and Brazilian mixed together, and that's the dance. like not knowing, all Brazilian dance is African pretty much,
Mhm.
or, and indigenous as well, obviously. But like, I'm, I'm thinking there were just different education wise. It was very much, and this is an American educational issue,
Mhm.
but the slave trade was very much taught as West Africa to Mississippi, and it was Mississippi and the South and in Georgia, and all people that were enslaved had grits, and like that was the diet of people. Like it wasn't that like, oh, some people had plantains, right?
Mhm.
And like, you know what I mean? And it was just, it wasn't, when I went to a Cuban restaurant in high school, like, and I was like, why do they have bananas with their food? I was like, it tastes good though. I didn't know that these were black people, right? And so, um, and also black, and the majority arrived via the slave trade. So I think it wasn't the American educational system, and this is what I realized later on, and which is why I do the work I do, is built in a way so that Black Americans think that they are the only Black people outside of Africa.
Mhm.
Like it's very intentional, because if you start to realize how much, the slave trade was so much more intentional than that, and how it was so much more about the slave labor and the economy than it was about the countries that people were in, then you
Mhm.
start to look at blackness, and you start to look at like workers' rights and where we are now in a very different way.
Absolutely. You hit it too. And the idea is that they want to keep it that way. I don't want y'all to unify around this idea that, oh wow, the village would really be powerful if we all would just get in our own lanes and do what we were purposed to do and we could actually change outcomes. They don't want us to know that, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Tiffany.
Thank
I'll
you.
move us into our second set of questions. How has the African diaspora impacted your career choice?
Um, I mean, I think it's the ebbs and flows, right? Like, both are, my career choice. I was talking about this yesterday, that when I got to undergrad, I had wanted to major in film, but then I took a Caribbean history course and learned about all this history, right? And I was like, oh, I want my films to have a, historical basis, and to be able to tell these stories through film. So I want to study the stories more. And that led me to studying abroad in Brazil. And then, when I graduated from college a couple years later, I thought I wanted to move back to Brazil. So I started looking at Black Brazilian artists. And then I started writing about Black Brazilian artists on a blog that I had my own, Correis Brianches, which is I no longer hosted the site, but um anywho, so it's, and then those relationships I built led me into more of the art scene in New York, ironically, even after I had moved. And then it led me to Baltimore. And then, I was starting the residency was influenced by me wanting to bring Brazilian friends to Baltimore. And so to experience Blackness in a Black American city like Baltimore. Um, and then, and then like I built the residency, and then, the publishing platform is about, art books and books by artists of African descent. That's what the main focus is right now. And um yeah, and it's all about that, it's all rooted in this idea of spreading the stories, and also like acknowledging, doing for younger versions of myself what wasn't done for me per se.
Like that. Like that. So you're trying to pay it forward, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you continuing to learn about the diaspora in your work?
Constantly learning. Like, I'm so I speak Portuguese. I understand a lot of Spanish, and I'm almost there, but I am constantly speaking to people who are from different parts of the world. So, like, I am also like, and I can read some French, so I'm also able to speak to some people who speak French too. But I'm, like, I'm constantly talking to friends and like building relationships with Black people from the UK, Black people from West Africa, from Senegal, from East Africa, from Uganda. Like, I'm constantly like talking to people about our experiences in Blackness and like reading and writing. So it's just something that happens organically, like things that I learned. Like, there was an aspect of Brazilian culture that I realized I had a question about, and like talking to a Black Brazilian friend about that. And so that's another way, just learning and like always placing myself in a space to learn, you
Mm.
know
Yeah,
and never like of a space of like i am I am the American expert on this. Which,
right, right. It's funny mentioned. I just can't remember what conversation it was in the last couple of days, but somebody talking about showing up to learn, because we'll get in these spaces and because we might be in a bad mood or something may happen or we got a deadline we got to meet. You come in and you there, but you're not there. So if I'm not gonna come to really engage and walk away with what I'm supposed to get, what's the point of going? So when you just said that, like showing up to actually learn, I'm coming here to take something away that I'm gonna share with not only myself but all these other people that is actually gonna empower the work that I'm doing. I love it. Good
thank you.
stuff. Um, Describe what the African diaspora has meant to you at this stage in your life.
It's meant everything. It's meant um it's meant a place and understanding of home. This idea, because I don't know if we talked about this, but I am starting to really get into our genealogy, and it's meant like knowing that it's possible for me to do it without um like without the ancestry test, right? Which would certainly be like an easier way to go about it, but I don't trust the agree with ethics. But anyways, so I mean, African diaspora to me has meant support and a place and like an understanding of home, and it's meant kinship and community and love, and like just a constant celebration of ourselves, and seeing like just like always finding new things. Like, I remember the last time I was in Brazil, I was with one of my friends, and something happened that like he was annoyed by, and he just went, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was an African thing, because we do that too. So it has to be, and just like, and that's a just constantly feeling like we're able to honor our ancestors by doing this work and by connecting with each other.
That's good. It's beautiful. Um, yeah, you said a lot right there, and it just kind of had my brain bouncing off the walls over here. um, Especially around America has really um, impacted the way that we connect with each other, and I'm thinking more about the diaspora in America, because that's my expertise, right? But what I'm thinking is that we were a people that village mindset type of people,
Hmm.
and we have been in a country that pushes individualism, right, the last 400 some years, and this whole idea of bootstraps. I used to use that saying, and then I had to start researching and educating myself on different terms and terminology. And when I really thought about it, nobody's pulling themselves up by their own bootstrap. Somebody has said, yes, I will give you your first job. Someone said they would give you a nickel to get on the bus. It's something that they contributed. And so, really unlearning, like you just talked about a little while ago, unlearning a lot of that stuff that has us stagnant because we're trying to too busy compete with who's next to me. Um, Lavette was a little discouraged because she has a podcast about mental health. And so it's called Loving My Growth. And I think a celebrity just launched one. And she was like, oh man, and that's what I was. And I'm like, wait a minute, time out. Do you know the same people that she know? I mean, yeah, they may know her because she's a star, but they don't know you. And so you sharing a story and telling them about mental health may resonate more because they know you than her. And I explained to her, even in this podcasting, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a process, right? You grow to this process, and over time you get more comfortable. It actually may morph into something that you never even thought it could be, because what we've been trained to do is, okay, put it in a box. That way you can control it. What he has for us is so much bigger and grander than that. That if we continue to put all these things in this little box, it just stagnates in all that brilliance and purpose and genius that's sitting inside of us. And so just hearing you share so far, it's like, how can we tap into that in our communities? That's what we got to tap into. We can't wait 20, 30 years down the road when we can actually start to get rid of some of that stuff that's in the way, because we know some more stuff gonna happen. We know we're gonna be traumatized again. But if we deal with it in the moment, it doesn't sit there and fester and grow into something else, right? So
Mhm.
anything.
I mean, I think that that's interesting because I just had a conversation recently.
Mhm.
Um, and it was so helpful. So my friend, one of my friends, Walter Cruz, he's from the Bronx as well, and
Like that Bronx, huh?
I know, and yeah, I think actually Dr. Marta Vega she is from New York, but I think she might actually be from Harlem.
Oh,
So but anyways, but I do love the Bronx. Um, I so Walter and I were like in a group critique with a bunch of artists, and I was talking about my own insecurities about like having a project that something similar is coming out this year, right? And I'm like still working on mine. And he was talking about this idea of the collective mindset. If we think from more of a collective mindset, that there doesn't just need to be one person doing this one thing, and especially if the greater goal is to spread knowledge in this way, right? Like to spread knowledge about mental health, or like in my case, like to spread knowledge about this project that I'm working on, right? Like, then don't we want as many people bringing awareness to it as possible?
absolutely.
And it's this idea, and I know that we all get caught into it, especially like when you're working and creating new things, that like you're like, wait, I want to be the first. And it's like, and I think breaking out of that is really hard, you know, especially because like for me, I'm part of my work ethic is like being the very best version of myself, right? And I can be very competitive when it comes to that, right? And so it's it's also about, it's hard, it's like taking that into, not letting that bleed into like I need to be the only person in the room.
Yes, yes, yes. Moving through it with humility, because recognizing that even if somebody said, just like you and I had the same podcast or idea, it's gonna look totally different because your experiences, your gifts, and your skills that you bring, that I bring, I'm gonna have a different slant to it, right? And so, to your point, everybody's not gonna. I don't care how good somebody's skills is. Everybody ain't gonna like you. But another person, they might connect with them based on their voice or their look or whatever it is that captures them, right? But I feel like um, we got to be pushing the message, a hard line. Because think about how many hours are wasted on shows that are meant to escape reality, right? They're just, and I'm not talking about nobody, I'm just saying like the guilty pleasure, because I've had those that I wasted all this time. And I'm like, at the end of it, okay, I got to laugh, or, oh, they was acting up. But what did I walk away? How is that going to better my life, right? And then I'm looking at all these podcasts now where I don't agree with 50% of what they're saying sometimes, but it's some nuggets in there for me. But if I don't watch it, I'm not going to get nothing. I'm just going to get all this empty, guilty pleasure, right? So just trying to, this is me speaking about me. People can do what they want. But I'm saying for me, it's like, okay, how do I find balance in that? And how do I make sure that what I'm spending my time on is actually effective, is going to affect me and my purpose that I was sent here for, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm trying to do some deep inner work. Like it was cool to be on the surface for a couple years, but now it's time to go deep and get rid of like those last few major traumas that you touch, but you back off because you really ain't ready for. But I need to hit them because the next, I got to get to work because the diaspora, I'm here because they made it. So I decided back because I went off. Now you got to, I told you to do some fingers or hand movements or something. Come back.
Oh, I'm supposed to do that?
No, I'm teasing, Tiffany. But when you see me go off, because I will something to spark and I'll go off on that tangent and won't come back. Okay. Moving us into our third set of questions. You're good. I like conversating with you. We're gonna have you back after the spring. How are you thinking differently about the African diaspora in 2020?
I don't know. I'm constantly sorry. I'm constantly evolving. I don't know. What do you mean by that?
So, I mean, we've been aware of the African diaspora. You and I have had several conversations. However, everything we witnessed this year, one pandemic related, one the anti-blackness that's taking place. Just thinking of 2020 as a year. How are you thinking differently? What are you like? What are your thoughts around what we've experienced? What's next? Like that type of. That's what I'm thinking.
So there's this Instagram page, but I think it's also like they're bigger than Instagram, but they call themselves the NAP Ministry. And
NAPP?
huh?
How's it spelled?
Nap like I'm taking a nap. And then they their focus is about like rest and the idea of, because there's been studies that show that Black people don't get as much rest as everybody else. So this idea that like rest and relaxation are important to us as Black people. So I bring that in to say, I've just been thinking a lot about the way that I engage with social media, because for a while, like I was really into this like this set of belief that I don't ascribe to, but like this like internet debate about Blackness that is very like rooted in like one set of people getting to define other people's Blackness and who gets in and out and all this stuff. And I was super invested in that, and like constantly like I was like on Twitter and on Facebook, just like getting, even if I wasn't engaging with the debates, I was like taking it in and taking in that energy, right? And some of that misery, which that it was shade, because some of that is just misery, honey. But anyways, so I was so clearly I still had like a little bits of feelings, but I I realized like I was exerting too much of myself, like I was like, I don't have time for this.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it is just like, it's like we deserve rest, relaxation, and we deserve peace, and engaging with certain things are not bringing me peace, so it's not worth my time. And so I think about that when I think about Blackness in this year. And like this year has been very much, you know for me personally, has been about taking time to like, what is it that I need? And not that I really have all the answers to that right now, but like that's things I've been thinking about. And what are conversations in Blackness that actually make me happy, and that actually bring me peace, and that I actually see bring other people peace. So that, I don't know if that answers the question, but
It does. You're thinking about really, it sounds like wellness to me because it's peace, it's rest, it's relaxation, it's that time just to decompress because we never get to decompress. And if you find little things that you do that you think is decompressing, it ain't really, because then when you get triggered, you lose your, you flash on everybody. So I think I'm happy that you highlighted that because this year has shown that if we don't take the time, you'll die and they'll keep on moving. Look how I'm just saying, look at how people with the COVID and these people acting like 300,000 people dead from this ain't nothing. But I'm like, one life is something. And so I think just reminding yourself that you are not your work. When they ask us who we are, we tend to say what our work is. We are not our work. Our work is important. And you're not though.
I know
You do the
that is
work.
the
You need to.
hardest, I think, for me, because I'm, you know, I was taking in this, when you asked me the three things I'm passionate about, I was taking this like online, one of those like cute little online quizzes. And I didn't realize, I guess I didn't really look at the website that it was in. Um, but you can hear me okay?
Mhm.
My air conditioning just went on. So, or my heat just went on. So, okay. The thing I was thinking about was like when I was taking the test, it was all these things that were geared around like in your job, what do you like to be? And it was like when you're at your job, are you really thinking about what you want to be doing like with your side, like your side projects or your passion things you're passionate about, whatnot. But I was like, I don't work for anybody else, right? And so it's very hard as a person who works for myself and who's like starting all these things to not see my work as me and me as my work, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that I learned this year, that was, I had a really good friend like pull me aside and be like, you need to really check on that because that's, those two things are separate,
Mhm.
and there's a way to make that like a healthy distinction. And I didn't realize like how much, and it's hard.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's very, very hard.
Mhm. I hear you. Um, and making a distinction between your current work, like the work you're doing, and your life's work, which to me, life's work is your more of your purpose. And so these things are contributing to my life's work, but they not my necessarily my life's work. But I'm glad that you pointed that out because so many of us, I remember being a young person. Like I'm like, okay, if I'm going to climb the ladder and I want to get this position and make this amount, I got to become my work, right? That's kind of what conditioned us in this space. And so then when you're in a room, what do you do? Or who are you? You're like, oh, I'm a educator. They asked you who were you. They didn't ask you what you did. You know what I'm saying? So we just trying to have more conversations where you're sharing these things out so that you actually can communicate who you really are and what you really do. I guess I'm trying to say. But I'm glad that you pointed that out. What is the biggest challenge that the African diaspora has faced or is facing in America?
um has faced the biggest challenge has been when we put in them ships. That's horrible.
Yeah.
You don't edit this, though.
No, but this is raw and uncut. And so if that's what you said, that's what you said, that's what you felt. Passion. Now people know somebody is just cussing because they like to cuss. It's passionate. Now, when I was about, no, I'm not even gonna play like that. I was gonna say I used to like to cuss. Now I cuss out of passion, and that's not true. I would cuss sometimes when people would piss me off, but that's because I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't know how to say what I really wanted to say, so I just cuss you out, right?
No, I mean, I definitely have my moments that remind me that I was raised on Too Short. But
Okay, I ain't even gonna say it. But y'all watched them. Was that last weekend they was on?
yes, I did, and yes, I was in my apartment screaming, like basically, I was having the time of my life. Like, I was having a party, yes, and it was all. I love that we were all like, Too Short is so problematic, and we know it, but we just all just gonna put this aside, like right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
And
it was about so much more. It was about like family and like it was about like,
simpler times.
yeah, and like just like memories.
And even with what you're talking about, it's about how the diaspora, because even some of his songs, I think about the ghetto. I know he got most of the songs, I'm a player and all that stuff. But the song The Ghetto really described the the poverty, just the conditions we've been in. And you look back, we used to do this workshop with Miss Davis called Beyond the Dream. And when we looked at back at the lyrics and the videos, Marvin Gaye, was it What's Going On? Make Me Wanna Holla.
Yeah.
That song, when you look at the images on there, The Message from 1986, The Ghetto from Too Short,
Mhm.
it was a couple of more, and then it was like Kendrick's Lamar, I Love Myself. You look at all the images, one thing that ain't changed, the hood ain't changed.
Yeah. I think about that with there's this like James Baldwin passage where he's talking about how, you know, being in Harlem, like the worst thing that you want to do is, if you're like, you don't want to be stopped by the cops, period, obviously, but like the worst is to be stopped by a black cop, because he's going to have to prove to his
Yeah.
colleagues that he's like whose side he's on. And then so James Baldwin was saying that in 1960s. And what did Ice Cube and NWA say in the police was like, you don't want to end up with a black cop for the same reason. And I just think about how like 50 years later in the what was the black art, major black art form at that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like people are saying the same thing. And
Yeah. And what gets the money is not the stuff that's saying the powerful stuff. So they trying to censor that, the stuff that's saying that, or you know, and then we get this little bebop to bop hip hop that ain't really no hip hop, you know, that ain't got no message, that ain't trying to empower us. And so you looking at all of that and you see it ain't never changed. It's like, why would we continue to say, like, that's just even around the voting. A lot of young people was like, we quit, why? If it was so great, and 60 years later, we still dealing with the same stuff, and we didn't have a black president. Like,
yeah, that's that's interesting too, because when I talk to a lot of friends like across the diaspora, like they're like, oh yeah, we haven't had a black president, you know, or what, our black prime minister or something. And I just like kind of feel like we're at the point where part of me, when they say that, I'm kind of like, do you really want one?
right, because here's the thing: we already know the president don't have no power, in a
And I
sense
think
that,
we learned like that was like
yeah. But then
content.
what it showed us is that white male patriarchy is alive and well. That's what the last 4 years have shown.
Yeah.
And so it's like, even if you are a person of color, um, they still, you ain't got no authority where you can make anything happen that's gonna really change our lives so drastically than what we are living now. And until we do away with the capitalistic, patriarchal system that is the United States of America, we will continue to be going through these motions and paying lip service to the elephant in the room, because we don't really want to touch it.
And I think what they want to do too is they want to be able to bring, white liberalism wants to bring it, be able to bring people of color, particularly black people, right? And then like people of color and white women into these roles, so that the blame doesn't just go on on white men anymore, right? So you can be able to say like, oh, you can't say that America is a racist country because our vice president is a black woman. And
Exactly.
that's the point of bringing more people in. And it's like, oh, we don't have, it's all,
I get what you mean. Yeah. And really the people are brought in to control the masses, right? The masses will get behind that person. So let's put them up front. Then the thing is, they get in there and all the stuff they told you they was gonna do, they ain't finna do that because they can't. They ain't got the power.
yeah, it's like even if they wanted to, like, I remember when Obama's I remember being so excited, like when Obama's his all the things that he was going to do, like before inauguration, like his platform, right? And I
Mhm.
remember like we were going to have like the high speed train and like all this stuff, right? Be able to he was going to address like STDs in, spreading in prisons, like all this stuff that was like crazy, like would have been really impactful. um and he couldn't do that. And I don't even think, I think he was always a centrist, but when he got in there, it was just kind of like, what, he's not going to be able to do this and this,
On
right?
top of
Certain
what
things,
you're trying to manage, right?
because the system is not built for that.
Mhm. Well, right, because what we see as the system is just a fraction of what it really is, because they can see the whole thing. We're the game that they're playing. We saw this with all this back and forth with Nancy and rest of them old chromies in there. It's a game, and we still chasing this white gaze, thinking it's real. It's an illusion. If you didn't see that in 2020, I mean, I've seen it before, but 2020 unveiled a lot, huh? Okay, we can go all day on that. In your opinion, how can we unify the African diaspora to change outcomes for our communities?
Um, I think as much knowledge as possible. People like I think people um looking at other I think media is really important, right? Like right now I'm watching this series by what's his name? Is it Steve McQueen? Um let me double check. But it's called Small Acts, right?
Like
He's
small
the
acts of kindness or something?
like small
Oh,
like the it's a yeah, Steve McQueen. It's a Bob Marley, or it's a proverb popularized by Bob Marley. If you are the big tree, we are the small axe.
oh, small acts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it's about West Indian people that came to London, right? That came to the UK. And I didn't know, like, because I lived in New York so long, like, I know a lot about like West Indian culture in the US and then, like, obviously, like, in the actual Caribbean. But I didn't know, I wasn't that familiar with like UK's, UK Black British experience. And so I think it's, even if you don't have, like, you're not in a space where you can meet people on an individual basis, like, you can watch media representations of people and see that they support, right? Because we know that there are like representations of blackness that we support, and then some that we wouldn't want people abroad to, think whatever. But like like learning histories of different places, I think is really important. And I think that's particularly important as Americans, because there's not a single like Brazilian that doesn't know who's in our top 40 of musicians, right? This year. But how many of us know what music they're listening to? Like who their favorite artists are, who their favorite, like what they eat, right? Like how they make their collard greens, because they have collard greens too. So like things like that, like doing that search to make the connections. Um and so I think that's a way that you do it too, because I'm just like just learning so much with this series too. It's really good, and it's also just, I realized it was also like a blind spot for me too, because I don't personally know any that many Black British people.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I do know a few um, that I had ran across when I was younger. We used to get staff at camp from Camp America. They called it. It was East Europe and mostly, I guess, the British Isles and all they whatever they own up there. Mostly, but I met a lot of people and met some really unique people. And we over the years, maybe quite a few were black.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was interesting. And 1300, the restaurant owners of 1300 in San Francisco. You remember 1300? That was on Fillmore Street.
As a Jamaican.
No, he's black British. His wife was Monetta. She's a USF graduate, and they
What kind
ended
of food
up with
was
black
it?
wife. But he's a chef. He's the actual chef, and he was from Europe. He used to tell his story to the young boys and he used to do cooking classes for them. This was way back, ooh, probably 15 years ago. But when you said
Uh,
that, you know who I'm talking about now, huh? That restaurant used to be on the corner. Kind of,
okay.
it's like a Southern, but it was a upscale Southern with a twist because he's not necessarily from the South. He's from British. Good food though, good drinks, good
Okay.
people. Yeah, so that made me think about him. I'm gonna move us into our final set of questions. Me and you can talk. I'm telling you, we're gonna have 2, 3 more episodes in 2021.
Hey.
Um, Share anything you are doing to educate others about the African diaspora.
Writing, curating, running my residency. I am publishing. I am constantly like highlighting artists, and my main focus is on the arts of the African diaspora, right?
Mhm,
So like arts and literature. So it could definitely be like there's other like there's food, there's music,
mhm,
you know, like not that music isn't also art, but like I focus on like visual art, like performance.
mhm,
So yeah, that's the avenue that I've chosen and that I've been drawn to.
mhm. Thank you. Have you taken any action to help others? And that could be just thinking anybody else with anything else you may be doing.
So one thing I think we were talking about earlier was this idea of collectivism versus individualism. So one of those ways that people are talking about helping out now is with things like mutual aid funds,
Mhm,
which is where it's not like the nonprofit you get the grant for they give you and you have to fill out all this paperwork. A mutual aid fund is like we put our money together and give it to people who need it. So that could be like me or you or whatever. And so to me, it's like important about like finding people who have access to that information and being like, how do I get money to this, that? And, and definitely like there's been lots of things that I've just like given money, like even if it's been like 10, 20, 30, $40, right, to this year that are because of this idea of like mutual aid, I think is really important. But also just, I mean, I think using a platform that I have to spread greater knowledge is like that's things that I do for all of us.
cool. That's awesome. I mean, you always got your hands in some meaningful work. So not
Yeah.
um, shocked. So how do you advocate for the needs of the community?
Um, I think by centering and hearing out the people who are the most vulnerable,
Mhm,
to me, that's the most important thing.
mhm. Um, and have you created any resources to counteract oppression?
I would like to think so. Um, I would like to think that the work that I do with the publishing and like the residency will um, have some impact in that way. Because I think at the heart of this oppression is lack of unity and, well, I mean, there's the oppressive state, right? Like that's the actual heart of all of this. But as far as ways to fight against that, I think are by dismantling our own internalized anti-blackness
Yes.
and then and we're in the heart of the empire here, so I make it a point to talk a lot about like what does it mean to be a black person in the empire, and like what does it mean to be, and what that means as far as like both being oppressed but also unfortunately being like the oppressors to other people who are black because of how America is.
And that's that lateral violence
Mm,
because I'm not afraid of you because you look like me, but I'm afraid to attack the people that's actually oppressing me. So I'm just going to attack those who are the safest, which are those that are lateral, right?
yeah.
Good stuff, Tiffany. Um, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to just say this. I know the projects that you've worked on that I've had the opportunity to either read or to see have impacted me. So I know you've impacted at least one life, but I'm pretty sure thousands more. And I just like that your commitment to the mayor residency. I wanted you to just talk a little bit more about that before I lift up my pearls and just tell them how you created it, what it was for, And that way we can put it at the bottom of the video and hopefully people will support and donate.
Yay. Okay. So, Mayor, our Mare residency is a part of Mare Projects, and Mare Projects is a platform, and the publishing is underneath that, and the residency is underneath that, and that was co-founded with me and two other women, Nora Arieta Fernandez and Tati Escalado, and they are Brazilian and Colombian, and are writers and scholars, and so we founded Mari Projects together, and then I founded the residency. So Mari Residency, because I get all sorts of questions about this, especially for people who are not in the arts. But the idea of a residency is it's a space and a time, and sometimes just a time for artists to sit and think and work on their work, and it could be, and it takes many different forms. Like sometimes you can be the artist in residence at a space and not live there. You'd be like the artist in residence at a university or whatnot. But my residency is centered around the artist experience and around connecting Black artists from different regions of the Americas and the Caribbean. So the first residency I had was with Sunspot Studios in Baltimore. And you'll see all their information on our website. And basically what we did was we had one artist from Dominican Republic and one artist from Baltimore, because the first residency was in Baltimore, and every residency has an artist from the specific locale. So we had them two in a house together, and they're both painters, and they're amazing painters. Jarrell Gibbs is just did something for New York Times. Rayleigh has been in multiple shows like across the country. So basically, I'm sorry. So they were in the house for 2 weeks because it was a pilot, so it wasn't as long as I would like for them to be in the future. And they, were together, and they bonded, and they worked, and they just like really inspired each other, and it was this beautiful project. And they got to see, Rayleigh got to see Baltimore from the perspective of a native, and he got to see this city that's like very historically Black and very beautiful, and like so much of its beauty is because of its Blackness. And then the second year we had to adjust because of COVID, but I had one artist that was from Brazil, and because of COVID, she wasn't able to come, so she was a virtual artist in residence. And then I had an artist from New York, Jasmine, and she is African American and Trinidadian. And then Asha Holmes was the artist from Baltimore, and they were all in a house together, and they work with video and new media and technology in their work. And so something we were really thinking about was this idea of Black women as being creators of technology, not necessarily in the sense that we think of technology today, but this idea of Black women as being the code. And ways we see that is through like cultural appropriation, like how many times you see, like, whether it be our bodies or our styles or whatever, duplicated and imitated, right? And then also thinking of like ways and like mastery, like Black women and Black people braiding maps into their hair, right? And so like the idea of like Black women as constantly, and like all these things that we've learned and how they've been passed down by Black women throughout time, right? So that's what they were thinking about during the residency, and that's the work they created, and that's part of a larger project that we're working on this coming up this year. So basically that's what the residency is in these 2 years. And then next year we're finally going to our next location, because it's nomadic, so it goes from different historically Black locations. And the next one will be in Loíza, Puerto Rico, which is outside of San Juan, and is a historically Black town and has a wonderful history. And it's just this place that I absolutely want to be in, and I have artists selected, and I'm hopefully going to be working with one of my heroes that I mentioned in this podcast. So fingers crossed. And yeah, I think that it's yeah, so it's basically it's just about spreading and connecting and shifting some of these ideas of how people should be connected and it not being based on language. So
Right.
after Puerto Rico, we plan to go to Trinidad, and then after Trinidad, Brazil, and then, and like opening it up even more. Like I also want to go to, I really want to go to Veracruz, you
Mhm.
know, and it's about, and now it's always about connecting with people in the community too.
Um, do you see it ever going to Africa?
So that's something that I've been thinking about too. Um, I mean, part of my work is about a good chunk of my work is about us connecting with each other as the descendants of people who were kidnapped in the transatlantic slave trade, right? And I so that's what the residency is about forming those connections and us seeing the similarities, but it's all, of course, so much of us our similarities are rooted in our Africanness, right?
Mhm.
And obviously, and so I've definitely, because I also in general just like work on like in like project based form too. So I've thought about like some projects, like doing a project in Ghana, doing a project in Senegal. Um, so I don't know if that would be me as an independent curator or the residency.
Mhm.
That's what I'm still, we'll see.
But possibly both.
Yes. And
Yeah,
if I get funding, possibly multiple things. So
I love it. I love that.
when I get funding.
That's good stuff, Tiff. I
Thank you.
mean, like I said before, I'm not shocked. Always knew you're going to be doing great things. Um, so I do want to just lift up a couple of the pearls I heard you say throughout the conversation, and then give you an opportunity to respond and close out the show. So the first thing I heard a lot of things. So I'm only doing four for time's sake. We deserve wellness. We deserve rest, relaxation, and peace.
Mm.
That's the African diaspora we're talking to in America. I also heard you say to always place yourself in a position or place to learn. So no matter what, every day, whatever experience, whoever I'll come across, there's something I'm supposed to get from that connection. So I appreciate you lifting that up. I heard you say that we have to educate and equip the village with the knowledge that they need, right? To be get unchained. So many of them. It's the mindset. We got to unchain that mindset. And then lastly, the importance of building solidarity through the music, the sharing of traditions and cultures with our other marginalized, actually kinfolk. A lot of people don't realize. If you really look into history, who was already kinfolk, but we our Latino sisters and brothers and cousins, and same thing with our indigenous brothers and sisters. Yes, I think music is very important to the soul, but that drum line. I don't care what country you go in, your soul is gonna pick it up no matter what kind of music. So I appreciate you for lifting up those pearls. And if you watch the entire episode, you could probably lift up a whole lot more that will connect with you. But Tiffany, I'm gonna give it back to you, and the last voice they hear will be yours.
Okay. Let's see. Well, firstly, I want to thank you so much. This has been beautiful. I'm so proud of you for this work. Really excited to see where this goes. It's already so amazing. Um, but let's see. One last advice for everyone is to let's see. Live and rest and take it easy and be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself is a good friend of mine once told me that when I was really young. And I think it's been the most important thing I've ever heard, really.
Thank you.